Hello.
Hi, okay, I'm all ready, and I've flipped through, and I've marked a few places where I'm like, so I've got some questions.
I
Go ahead.
sent you another one about the farm. The governor has a program, and we know for farms and how long they've been here and what they have contributed to the area. And it was a Hall of Fame, and we received the nomination. And so I attached that for you that explains how we came to, not that you care about probably all of these names, except that they're the family of Cross. And it goes back one generation before I was giving you the information. But it's more concise. And I think the thing that surprised me the most is that it wasn't the farm and it wasn't the store that bought us notoriety, although Mr. Cross just raised pristine tobacco. I mean, it just was beautiful. They knew how to test the ground and put the right nutrients in it, and it just was a nice farm. And but and I'm speaking of Russell and Lewis, who were George and Hattie's one of 11 children. Wait a minute, George was one of 11. Russell, my husband's father,
Right,
was one of 8. And when their mother died, who was the last one to die, let me go back. The father died in 1917, George, with a cerebral hemorrhage.
right.
Okay, which is the same thing David and Bertie had 2 generations later, or every other generation. So he passed away 2 years before Russell married Alberta. And so he never got to see the farm develop, but grandmother Hattie did. So when she passed away, she left the farm to all 9 children. So Russell and Lewis bought out all of the children, and it was like 170 acres.
Oh, my gosh.
Let me back it up and say 140 acres, because they split it. And the split was a road that went down between the 2 farms, and each one of them got around 74 acres. Now we have...
Why are you saying 2 farms?
Because we took the one farm and made it 2 for Russell to have his share and Lewis to have his share.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Lewis was he was getting people that would come in and fool around on his farm. He didn't do an awful lot of farming, but he did some. And but Russell actually really, we raised tobacco. That was your primary crop, because whatever you would make on that crop would take you a whole year. That was all you got that whole year, unless you were in some other kind of business.
Mm-hmm.
Which Russell and Lewis were, and where they made all their money was there were no tobacco markets, like I knew them, where everybody would take their tobacco up to Upper Marlboro or down to La Plata, and they were sold. All your tobacco was sold there. Russell and Lewis went to work for Farm Bureau feeds and were tobacco buyers. Now, I never did find out how they got their money, to do this, but they would go from farm to farm to farm and buy tobacco that was in the barn from the farmer. and then they
but
would
they
bring
grow. How does that make sense? They grow it. They have their own supply.
Well, but the tobacco has to be processed to be worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
The tobacco has to be sold to buyers, and like they might get $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for your crop, or $10,000 for your crop, and that's all you had to live on all year long.
Oh my
So
gosh!
Russell and Lewis were actually the tobacco dealers. And the little old store that was there was just a little nothing because they just used it to sell a little bit of fertilizer and and a little bit of feed. I mean, it wasn't a couple of $1,000s worth of stuff. It was just to be convenient. And then, we raised soybeans and we raised corn, and there's a beautiful cornfield in front of Jennifer's house right now because the property was all over there. So when we came along, we talked Mrs. Cross into giving Mike, 5 acres, and Susan 5 acres, and Davy 5 acres. And so, as we came along, you sort of cut down on take your 170 some and deduct this and deduct that. But Miss Cross was she churned butter. She would raise chickens and eggs and had a huge garden of fresh vegetables, and all that would be gathered, and they would go to a Saturday day market in downtown D.C.
A farmer's market.
The farming market, yes. And she remembers seeing stores get their first windows, like Hex and what else? What were some of the big names? Oh, shoot, I can't think now. Hex was one of them.
Is that with an H, like H-E-X?
Hechts. And it was a clothing store.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just one of to see a window come in a store and be able to look through and see what was in the store was big stuff. So, see, I missed out on getting all that because I was back in the 20s and 30s. But she was also the bookkeeper for the new store that they had, and they might have had 6 or 8 customers in a day. But my David would ride in the truck with the older men to pick up the products and go on deliveries, and even when he was a little tot, oh my goodness. So he'd been on that business for a long time. And then Dave Jr. was the same thing. We could not keep Dave Jr. away from that store. So when Grandpa Russell had cancer, he then passed the family business down to the 4th generation, which was his son and myself, Sandra. Mm-hmm. And, the kids still grew up helping on the farm and in the business, learning about the farming business beside their grandfather and father. And the tobacco markets had started back in, 60s, 50s maybe. So they no longer did that, going to the farm and buying somebody's tobacco in the barn. We now took it to Upper Marlboro, so you would have to pack it in a big, what they called a Hugsit. They had me type a letter one day, and I said, well, how do I spell Hugsit, Dave? And he said, Hogsshed. I said, David, that's Hogshed.
Uh-huh.
He said, no, in farm talk, it's Hugsit.
Oh.
but it was this big round thing that the people would get down in and hand them this tobacco that they had stripped and put it all in that, close it up, and Dave could drive. I think he said 8. And they, at the early time, they would take it down to the wharf in Nottingham, and the tobacco would go to Baltimore. Later, then it went to a local market. So in the meantime, wives are still, standing home and doing all the, let's see, I used to do my canning, and we didn't do much freezing then, didn't have freezers, with one child on my hip and the other child playing in the pan cabinet underneath the stove. And you're standing there with all this hot stuff, and the kids wanting you to come play with them and do things. So it was kind of fun.
But you weren't always a farm girl.
No. I actually, I'm kind of funny. I'd gone to church with Dave a long time and just didn't pay any attention to him. And I kind of looked in the back one day, because he sat in the back because he was going to go to a ball game that he was playing in, and he was winking at somebody. I was thoroughly distracted at that time. I was 14. Looked like I was 20. I mean, just a body that just said, you're 18 anyhow. And I was just in, I was supposed to say single child. That's not what I want to say. I was an only child. So my playmates were adults in my music. So I looked to my right trying to see who he was looking at. There wasn't anybody looking at him. And I looked back, and he just sort of did one of those, with his finger pointing, you. And I looked again, and then I looked back, and he pointed at me again, and I said, me? Kind of like, and he said, yeah. So, yeah, he kind of took my heart. I really didn't, I hadn't been, well, I'll tell you, I really wasn't listening to what he was doing or saying or anything. I was so excited because that afternoon I was having an organ delivered at my house.
So that's all, the entire thing on your mind that day.
Yes, because I had been called on to do some playing of organ, and I had not been taught on organ, because it's very different how you hold your hand, and you have to, instead of having a pedal to hold your notes for you, you had to do it with your fingers. So it was something really different to learn. So my parents had gotten me a little, it was a 2 keyboard, and had 9 pedals, or just a little less than an octave, because it had the black notes too. And I just was so excited about that coming, and David had waited for me at the back door, and I was just bubbling, you're getting your organ today? Yeah, you want to come by and see it? Yeah. So he came up to the house. We went in, and I saw the organ. Mama had it in the living room. I was just so excited. Oh, my goodness. And he stayed, and we sang. I played hymns, and we sang, and my mother was just such a beautiful person. She was almost hosting this new person that was coming into my life. And she sort of didn't know whether to leave him there with me, or Daddy wasn't there because he worked at nights. And so finally she said, well, David, it's getting close to, eating after church. Would you like to eat with us? And he said, yeah, I would. He said, but I need to go do something first. And he left. But he had said, I'll be back. And what he had done, he had just broken up, well, I don't know when, with his girlfriend that he had dated till everybody was sure that they were going to get married, except she was Catholic. And she was a very staunch Catholic. And she had been just recently to his church for a funeral or something and held her hands over her ears and said when she came out to David, she said, I hope you know that if we were to have any children, they would not be going to your church.
Ooh.
You would have to come to my church or not come at all, because she said I would not allow my children in there. And,
wow. And that was at the Methodist church?
Yes.
What was the name of that church?
It's our church, Emmanuel with an I, Immanuel.
And how long had the Crosses been going there?
Oh, all their lives. Yeah, Bertie was married there.
So this girl, what she's saying is blasphemy. Ugh.
Oh, my goodness. And for someone who found it very hard to make a decision, this man said, this isn't going to work for me, and went to visit her. So he was open for a new relationship when he came to me. But he had asked a girl out that evening. So what he did...
he was moving quickly, David.
He left and went, well, I don't know how much time had expired between the two, but he left my house and he went and evidently called this girl and told her that he wasn't coming, and came back, and we were together forever after that. That was February of 1959, and I was 14.
I was just going to say, what'd your parents think? Because he's 8 years older than you.
And my mother and father knew his parents very well. And they were very well respected. Bertie was very well respected. They had another son, and it wasn't like some Joe Blow from here that they don't know anything about. They knew his history. They knew what he had, what he'd done, and he seemed like a decent guy. Not that my mother didn't take him aside and talk birds and bees philosophy to him. David Cross, I'm giving you my daughter to date, and I expect you to treat her right and stay within the margins of what that means, and et cetera. So, and told me I had to go on double dates. So I went on a double date one time. I don't even remember who the other couple was, but they never required, I guess I complained or something. Maybe I said it was okay, but we didn't have to double date after that. And the very first place that he took me was shoot, the Caverns, not Carlsbad, but the one over here in Virginia. Why am I not remembering?
Oh, it's okay. I'll look it up.
There are caverns down in Richmond.
So your first official solo date was to go in a deep, dark corner somewhere. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, where they, and they played organ music down there.
Oh, wow, that sounds amazing.
The stalactites and the stalagmites, one grows up and one grows down, and I don't remember.
Oh, yeah. Stalactites are on the top and stalagmites are on the bottom.
And so he had trouble getting me. I was cold down there, but was I enjoying listening. It was great big theater organ. somebody was playing, and it was just mesmerizing. So, but I was still 14. So I had to come home and go to school the next day, and it was tough making A's and B's and getting out of high school with that distraction. But
what kind of grades did you get?
Oh, I was on the Honor Society. I didn't get all A's, but I got enough A's and B's that I was, on the Honor Society. Not the honor roll, but inducted into the Honor Society. And I would take him with me when we had sock hops and various and sundry kinds of things like that. And the girls would want to dance with him because they thought, here he was, 22 years old, out there dancing in his socks. Oh, my, it was so fun. So, I don't know, I'm trying to find my what did I do with it? Because I listed, well, you have it in your hand.
I do.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to college?
No, I did not. I did go.
Why not?
I did go because I got married at 18.
Mm-hmm.
I did go and take college courses in music for a couple years. And
that seems to be a very common theme with all three of you. It's, hey, got married, stopped working, stopped school, and just became a wife. Was that expected?
I don't think as many of my classmates went to college as you would expect. But I've been going with him for 4 years. You plan, you think, I went to the went to work for the Census Bureau when I turned 18. And I was secretary to Paul Berard and the Steel and
the chief of metal and steel products.
That's right. And I did a lot of proofreading because we published information, and I did a lot of proofreading. I guess that's why I enjoy doing it now.
Yeah, it seems like you were really good at writing. You were helping your teacher to type and transcribe documents, and you're helping him, and you can do shorthand. You were very skilled in the writing department.
But then we got married, and we went on a month honeymoon. We went out to Birdie's, and then they got with us, and they went on a 10,000-mile trip they took us on just out there, and went to Mexico, and crazy things happened, like Dave had to go to the bathroom. So he stopped alongside the road in Mexico and went in. It was a crop of some kind, I don't know, but it was as tall as he was. When he came out, he had a stop sign. So we took a picture of him and said he went in there to get the stop sign. It just crazy things. Joe drove our car with the emergency brake on.
Oh.
It just was. They were getting solicited. So crazy things go on like that, and then they took us to all the places we'd never been, and that's where the story comes from, that of being down in Death Valley, and they found this outhouse Joe knew about down underneath a embankment. And I went running down there and went running in, and it had a metal roof. And Joe knew it had a metal roof, so he decided he was going to throw a handful of rocks down there.
Oh,
And
this sounds very familiar to what Grandma Cross would do.
I came tearing out of that place. Oh, my goodness. Running out with my pants down around my feet.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and Bertie, of course, had one of those things happen where she ran in the bathroom and Joe went in the men's at the same time. And they were porta potties. They were, I think, for some reason, they were joined with one wall. So she gets in there and she taps on the wall and she says, "I hear you peeing." And then takes her time coming out. By that time, Joe is out and at the car putting gas in. And she comes out and she said, she looked at Joe and she looked at the bathroom and she looked at Joe. And she said, "I just talked to you on the wall in the bathroom." And he said, "No, you didn't." And whether she knows by now that it wasn't her, that it was him, But they carried her for a long time on that. So they just showed us so much fun and so many things that it just made fun going out there. And then, of course, we came by Lois's on our way back. And
sure.
We hadn't, let's see, that was 62. Russ was killed in 60.
Right. So you were still visiting, and one of my favorite things is that even though Russ had passed away, Lois was still always one of the family. Never, ever left out or, "Oh, you're going to marry and be part of some new family." She was always kept in the loop, never to be separated from the Cross and the Deckers.
That, to me, was very important. To Mom was very important. And it had nothing to, I started to say it had nothing to do with Russ, but of course it was. She was his widow. And, but her last name was Cross. And her grandchildren's name were Cross. And so they were part of us. And when Lois came on when she went to remarry and to tell us that she had met a man and that she would like to get married, and she didn't ask Mom's permission, but she just wanted her to know and us, so that it wasn't a shock. You hear it on the phone or something. So, and there were 2 children that Bill brought into the marriage, and we just treated them just like Lois. I heard her say many times this last weekend while we were there, "Luann is my daughter." How are you related?
Yeah.
Luann is my daughter, not my stepdaughter, but my daughter.
Right.
And it just was one of the things that we would remark about, that when they were together, we couldn't tell whose child was whose, because they treated them, all 4 of them, the same.
Right.
So, but we have always tried to, like when they had Lois's 80th birthday party, I paid for our whole family to go down. I said,
"Oh, wow.
This is important. I want you to know your family, because they don't see them, they don't interact with them. Like them coming to Bertie's party was wonderful, because they met you, they put names with people, and Grandma, we want to go back and see so and so. Carl and Marla are planning to come here. Stacy would like to come here. That, you know, different, and they put names with the people, and I just love that. I am so thankful now if we can just get to Lois's, you know, in time to meet some of their children. Theirs are more widespread. So
right.
I don't know. But
across the state. Well, we got to get up there probably next summer for your birthday party.
Yeah. Oh, my.
80 years, it's a big deal.
I cannot believe it.
No? How old do you think you are in your head?
60.
Ah. I asked Bertie the same question, and she looked at me and she said, I'm still your age. I thought that was interesting.
She comes up with the sharpest answers. Oh, my goodness.
So why was David called a peeping Tom? What happened?
He was looking to see where I was.
Okay. He only had eyes for you from that moment on.
Yeah, he was really a very, very special.
And how many years were you married together? All together?
49. Another year, and we'd have been married 50. But add the 4 years that I'd known him, dated him, and, you know, been around him. So.
Right.
But
what? I figure that he signed up for the Air National Guard, but not the military. And the other guys were all signed up for the military, but why didn't David enlist?
His parents did not want him to. His parents did not want Russell to. And there was a lot of discussion about that. But, you know, Dave wanted to be here on the farm with his parents. I mean, he had scholarship offers for playing sports. And he hated school. The girls he went to school with teased about how many of them did his homework. But you know, he just loved the farm. He just loved doing the work of the farm and seeing it produce and seeing, you know, what he had done with his hands and what he knew how to do, because his father had taught him, you know, which some things have its limits and liabilities, but for the most part, you know, he learned everything he did from his dad and put it into, you know, this is how you grow tobacco. This is how I do my garden. Do not go in my garden. You know, I will bring you the vegetables and you do your part. But I only worked for a year, which did not please my mother-in-law at all, because I was told that there had never been a cross wife that had had to work out away from the farm.
Ah, there we go.
But
tell me more about that. They were always the bookkeeper, or always worked the garden, or always there was some kind of how it's got to be.
Oh yeah, and it was like the church people were that way. I mean, it's for the most part, you know. Russell and Shirley and the couples that came along as we were there, you worked whatever, you know. For instance, Dave had cows and they had to be milked, and then Alberta would do whatever she did with the milk, because they took that down on the market also. And then she churned butter, and she had her chickens, and there was just not the demand and not the rush that we have experienced today, or that you experience when you go to when you leave home and you go to work. You have a requirement to meet, a time frame to meet, and I worked at the Census Bureau, and I carpooled with two other girls that I'd gone to school with, and you had that interaction. It was kind of hard to give that part of it up. Of course, I became pregnant, so I actually worked then just for a year. Later on, after Dave Jr. came in the business, I actually went to work. I'm just very history-minded, very buildings, people, everything. And so I started going to the historic preservation meetings, and I was taking notes, and I had already been involved with these ladies. Yeah, you want to know something about the Young family? Well, I know Mr. Young. So I'd call up Mr. Young, could I come by and bring some friends of mine, and we talk about your farm or look at a cemetery that's on your farm? I knew the people. I went to church with them. I talked with them, where the people that I worked for couldn't get in to see these people because they were labeled government. I could bring them with me, and they trusted that it was okay. So I had established sort of that basis as the children. Oh, I can remember two older ladies who were writing up cemetery readings, tombstone readings, and of course the ones that are buried in the woods, you rely on people who hunt, like David Cross, to know where these things are. And these two ladies came down one day, and Mrs. Cross watched whoever it was I had just had, probably Davy, just Davy maybe, and Dave and I took these two ladies down and took them down to this cemetery that was way, way off the road. And, of course, you figure, why is it here, and who was important that lived here? And they had my husband wrapped around their little finger, and he went in this gated cemetery that was just so overgrown, and he cut down weeds, and he undirted stones and propped them up, and he had taken a brush with him, and he brushed them all off. Oh, these ladies just thought he was pumpkin pie. So then I brought him back to the house, and I had made lunch before I left, and we sat there and talked, and they talked as much to David as they do to me, because he was, their project was historic cemeteries that people had not discovered yet, and he'd already discovered a whole bunch of them. So he and the kids, I have a picture of them going with me one day to find this cemetery, and he's got a big old stick like a staff would be. And he's walking along. The kids they've got their little shovels, and well, he just had so much fun. He liked to do things like that.
And you have 3 children. David, who I believe he goes by Davy. Is that right?
No, take off the Y.
Okay, so your husband is Davy.
My husband is David.
I know. Who's Davy? Somebody's called Davy.
Well, Davy was his younger name. Dave Jr. was the one that grew up here, the one that I birthed.
Okay, so Davy is David Sr. and David Jr. is Jr.
All right. Now, David Sr. is David Sr. and David, never referred to as Dave. The son, our son, is Davey.
Ah, okay.
In his adulthood, he goes by Dave. Although there are lots of people call him Davey too. But he prefers to be called Dave.
Okay. And who are the Garners? I've seen pictures of Bertie and Joe and Russell with the Garners, and I don't know who they are or where they come from and why are they in our family photos?
Because they are cousins, and while we lived here on this farm, the farm directly behind us was their farm, and their mother and Russell were brother and sister.
Who's their mother?
Their mother was Kate Cross, who married Ernest Garner Sr.
Okay, so that's Aunt Kate. Got it.
So my David and Bertie and Russell, their playmates were the house that is identical to this White House up here is down on Uncle Lewis's side of the farm. And so Uncle Lewis's children were there, which was Dr. Cross and Jack. And then you follow the road back a little bit more, and then the Garners had bought that part of it.
Okay. So Bertie talks about having to go and bring in the cattle, and her and all the girls, the cousins, had to go get the cattle and bring them in. And so that would have been the Garners. Because they're all on the same basic property.
They're on an adjoining farm. It's not part of Russell's 74 acres, and it's not part of Lewis's 74 acres. It abuts them.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how much cattle they had. When I came around, they only had like 2 or 3 and a bull. When Dave said he was going to milk the cows, I don't know how long that took. To determine how many cows it was. I know on a date night for David and I, he had to make sure that the cows were milked before he could go someplace. So Mom would do something with the cows. But the milk and but I don't know how many it was. But to milk them, you have to get them to come back up into the stable.
Right.
So that's what she's talking about, going out. So that's in her generation of a childhood. So I wasn't around then.
Bertie says that Grandma Cross was rather stern. But it seems like you have a different perspective. Now, granted, by the time a parent gets to the 3rd child, they start getting more, I don't know, lenient. So perhaps by the time you were hanging around the family, Grandma Cross, I call it Great Grandma Cross, was a little bit more relaxed. I don't know. What do you think?
You were talking about Russell's mother.
Yes.
Correct. Hattie Alberta.
Yes.
Or Hattie. She was just Hattie.
Oh, no, it would be Alberta May. No, Hattie Alberta. So Grandma's grandma. Yep.
Okay. Hattie was not Hattie Alberta, I don't think.
Yeah, Grandma is Hattie Alberta, Mom is Alberta May, and daughter is Hattie Alberta again.
Correct. Okay. I wasn't aware that her middle name was Alberta, but that's okay. And Stern doesn't cut it.
Oh, tell me more.
She died in 1955. When Dave graduated from high school, it was like one of the graduation nights or something. Or maybe it was Halloween. They were out trick-or-treating. Well, they were tricking is what they were doing, but anyhow.
Yeah, it seems to be how they work.
The only things that I have heard about her is at that point she still owned the farm. Okay, they did not divide the farm. They divided it mentally, but I don't think it was divided. It may have been. Anyhow, grandmother Cross, grandmother Hattie, was Stern from what David had said also, because she evidently yelled a lot, and she did mean things, like she tried to kill Bertie's kitten. Did she tell you that story?
No.
Bertie had a sweet kitten. You know, we all go through a kitten or a dog or something, and granted, it would come to you because it was the tamer one. Well, Grandmother Cross decided one day that we had too many cats, and she took that cat and put it in a bucket of water and put a brick on it.
Oh no!
And Bertie saw her and said, "You're killing my kitten. Why are you killing my kitten?" And she said, "Because we're too many." Well, you don't have to fit mine. And Bertie picked up not a board, like a piece of wood, that's it, and threw it at her, hit her. Then she went and got her kitten out of that water. And Grandmother Hattie went to Alberta and said, "Alberta, that girl," I don't know how she had 9 children, golly, "that girl threw a piece of wood at me." And Alberta said, "And what'd you do to her?" She said, "Well, I'm just trying to kill a cat. You know, we got too many cats around here." She said, "Well, why did you get hers?" "Well, she was close. I could get it." She said, "Well, I don't blame her for throwing the wood at her." Well, Grandmother then just got even madder. You see, Alberta was living with her mother-in-law.
Yeah, that's awkward. It's a strange in-between place.
Imagine how awkward that was. But she lived with a woman who would do nothing. You know, she would not cook. She didn't. It's like Alberta. Anyhow, she just sort of sat around, and I never heard anybody talk about what she did to contribute to the house. And then later she became sickly, and Alberta had to give her medicine, and they did things like the doctor wouldn't give out a lot of information about her, but they figured they would see if her medicine was doing any good, and they took the pills and emptied out the medicine and put salt or something, sugar in them.
Okay.
And of course, she says, "Well, I'm just getting worse. If I didn't have this medicine, I wouldn't make it." And they all knew that it was sugar. So, but David was a rascal around her. I don't know how they let him get away with all this stuff. It wasn't mean, but it was, he moved Grandmother Cross's toothpaste and put Bengay in its place, and ew. So I don't know how they controlled these little stunts, but he was mischievous.
Mhm.
So, not so much when I met him, although he went to the things at the church, like I would go for the Halloween party and dress up in a costume, and he would come with a big old face and try to scare everybody. That's not the kind of thing I wanted, but he thought that was funny. And the men out at the store would tell the story that they were supposed to be stripping tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
They would get a game of cards going, and they would have one of them that would be a lookout for Grandma Cross, because they saw Miss Hattie coming. Miss Hattie coming. Put them cards away. And Miss Hattie would come out there and she'd say, I know you all been playing cards, but you don't have enough strips. Look there. You don't have enough strips.
Oh.
So, you just hear the stories. Once we got married and I moved here in Miss Hattie's room, and we began planning. Well, we had, before we got married, we had been to the man about building us a house.
Right.
And our house is built in the middle of the orchard. Now, when you have a piece of land, the county tells you where your house is to be built. So if I couldn't have it out in front, closer to the road, because that's where the tobacco beds always went.
Right.
So you have to have it approved by the county and whatnot. So they had not started it when we got back from our honeymoon, in like the 1st of November. So that was when they started it. Grandmother Lusby, Alberta's mother, passed away right before Christmas. Mm-hmm. And Mom and Dad had gone to Bertie's that Christmas. They had gone out like the week before, and they were going to stay, I don't know whether it was 2 weeks or what, but they had the house to ourselves. which Dave Jr. was born October 6th. They laughed about we were alone for too long and all this stuff. Oh, sure. Girl, now this is not a part of anything else, but I'm going to tell you what. I was 18. I was learning life as it happened, because my mother gave me a book about sex and everything, and went through and put X's through paragraphs and said, now I don't want you to read those paragraphs.
Oh, she censored it. Interesting.
Let's guess which ones I read first.
Of course. She didn't mark them off very well. She should have got herself a black crayon.
But I knew very little about a lot of things. So in, must have been January, I was so sick. I had the flu, and I couldn't get rid of it. It was 3 or 4 days, and I was supposed to be at work, and I was just throwing up, and so David took me to his doctor, and this guy couldn't have been 5 feet tall, and his little fingers couldn't have been longer than 2 inches. And he says to me, come with me into the examining room. And I looked at David, and he looked at me. I didn't have any idea I was going to have a pelvic exam. And when they set me up on that table and put my feet in those stirrups, I thought I would literally turn inside out 2 times and say, you're pregnant. What? Because we had talked about that, and David wanted children right away, and I said, well, don't have to rush it like that, and because he was 26.
Uh-huh.
And he said my children would be, I'd be too old to play with them. So it was announced that I was pregnant, and so I went to the doctor that was next door to him, which was Dr. Cross's office that he shared with my gynecologist, only to find out that I had Rh negative blood. Oh, I had negative blood, A negative. And so this might be a difficult carrying. I'm like, what do you mean difficult? I mean, I didn't know to be happy,
Uh-huh.
I didn't know what pregnant was going to mean for me. I'm working, we're building a house. Anyhow, life was quite interesting. It's just all the things that you experience when you know how you were with your first child. Well, pretend you're 18 and have all that happen. So I turned 19 that year. Well, we got into the house. I was so excited about getting in that house, and the house was ready to go. The furniture had been delivered. We didn't have carpets because we had wonderful hardwood floors, and we didn't have curtains at the window. Who thought to get curtains? Alberta says, well, you can't stay out over there with no curtains. You'll have to wait until you get the curtains to move in. And I said, I don't think so. I said, here, David.
Time to.
And we put sheets and towels and everything you could think of up to the bedroom windows. And we slept in that bed that night, and it was wonderful just to have your own home, to not have to be quiet for anybody, although you had the windows open, but it just was wonderful. It was special. So then I had my 19th birthday, and we joined a bowling league with some friends of ours. And and these are the big balls, I actually bowled the night I had Davy. The doctor was going away, and he said, I want you to meet me at the hospital at 9 o'clock, and I'm going to break your water, and you'll go into labor. And I'm like, no, you can't. I bowled on that night, or I think it was Saturday night. And we don't get out.
So determined.
And we don't get out until 11:45. He said, then meet me at 12 o'clock. So we met him at 12 o'clock, and, not knowing what I could have, what I didn't have. In those days, the husband sat out in the other room, and you were in a room by yourself. And I was listening to these women yelling and these other rooms, and I'm going, what is wrong with them? Of course, my pregnancy hadn't gotten there yet. So my doctor goes out, and he said, she'll be about another 8 hours. You go ahead home, David, get your sleep for tonight, and come back in the morning around, 8 or 9 o'clock. When I found out he sent him home, I'm like, I don't believe you. You're just a man. He should share as much in this getting it out as anybody.
Sure.
He went and had a good night's sleep and came back fresh as a daisy the next morning. And 10 something that morning I had him.
Mm.
And I didn't get to see him till a little bit later, you know, and they keep you in the hospital 4 days, and times were different. And they didn't, you didn't get that basket brought to you, the cradle or whatever they call it. They just handed you the baby, and you kept the baby, held the baby for however long it took to feed.
Did you put the babies in a dresser drawer?
No, that was my mother, was put in the dresser drawer. That was Phyllis.
Mm. I want to talk more about Phyllis but I have a question about Alice, your grandmother. You have a note here that she contracted tuberculosis. Is that what eventually killed her?
So that is Alice's mother. That's Agnes Greer. Agnes Jackson Greer. And she was a caregiver for a lady with tuberculosis, which seems pretty dumb, but anyhow, she contracted it. So that left my mother, my grandmother, my nanny, that left Alice sort of without any place to live, because her father, William Zachariah, wasn't much. Seemed to think he had a drinking problem, and he didn't hold a job very well, so he just kind of pawned her off to the relatives, and she had a kind of a sad childhood, and that was why she never wanted me to do any of this history. You open up closets you don't want to have open, and you know, she didn't get to go to school sometime because her father never even sent a nickel down for her to get shoes or anything. So, you know, it was hard, and she was shuffled between two places. So once she was able to graduate and get out of that situation, she went to live in town with a relative and worked at I think it was a Kresge's. I think that was hers, until she met my grandfather, who was 30 years older than she. And, of course, the family did not like it because she married him, and he was going to go.
Is that a little bit of the escapism of, if I marry him, he's got a home, he's got a place, and I can get out of this family?
And that could very well be. And the other thing is, that was the father image. That's what it said to me, 30 years older. You know, that she had missed having her father all those years. So she was looking for, you know, this older man was really nice for her. And he had lost two of his wives. His childbirth must have been very difficult in years.
I have that he's only 24 or 20 years older, 1879. Something. I might have my notes wrong. I'll have to double check.
I was thinking it was 30. I don't have my notes in front of me.
Is that Lucius?
Yes.
Lucius, 1879, and she's 96. But I could have my notes wrong. I trust your notes better than my own.
It's 17 years. That could very well be. You have to go with the dates. But she would still come back to the country, you know, to visit all this family. And, of course, as Mama grew up, she always wanted to come back and see her friends and some of the my grandmother would go to see older people. And so she went to see Mrs. Cooke, which was my dad's parents. She went to see the Siggers. They're the ones that pretty much raised her. And Mama would go across and see Cousin Pearl that lived in the trailer across. So, you know, she kind of noticed this guy driving around in a car looking at her, and he was going, new person in town. And, you know, that was how they got together, started dating.
What about Phyllis's second marriage? You don't have this in the notes anywhere, but that's a whole little can of worms. Tell me about that.
Well, that's, you know, I guess that was written before then. My dad died in 1987, and Bertie and Joe would come every year, and sometimes when they stopped coming in the summer, they would, or maybe they still did, but they would come in January when the ROA, retired officers, would have their conventions downtown. And that was not as long a stay. You know, they were here maybe a week and 10 days. And Bud had gotten out of his marriage to Virginia, so he was single. My mom was widowed, and it had been, I guess, 2 or 3 years for her. And so Bud came on with Bertie. They said they were, you know, he just was kind of sitting around, and so come on, we'll go and you can be around in Maryland. Well, Bertie and them would go in town, and so Bud needed something to do with his time, so, you know, he saw Phyllis, and he said, well, maybe I could go down and spend an evening, we could play a game or something, and
sure.
He kind of got like he liked that, and the next time he came there, they were riding back and forth. The next year when he came back, he wanted to borrow Ms. Cross's car, Alberta's car, and as far as she was concerned, that car was Russell.
Okay.
You can borrow that, but you better be careful, and you better not mess it up, and you've got to be home by 11. Gave him an expiration time.
But at this point, he's 64, 65. He doesn't need this talking to.
Well, he got it anyhow.
Yep.
So they dated for a couple of years, and then we went out there, and then she wanted to stay a little longer, and then he came back. He was, you know, they just were kind of telephoning and letter writing and becoming just having a marvelous time, because there's no two ways about it. But he just made her life complete, and she did the same with him. They found things in their second marriage that they hadn't. In Mama's case, not that her first marriage was bad, it just, Daddy was very different. Daddy was not affectionate, outwardly affectionate, and Bud just was all the time. He said, you know, he just kept thanking God for her, and he said, if I'd known, how did he word it? Mama would kiss him often, and he said, I don't know what it's like to live in a marriage where the only time you're kissed is when they want something. Mm-hmm. And he said, I've just never known anybody like you, Phyllis, just to kiss me because, and he'd stop and she'd say, because I love you. So they were pretty cute together.
This is your brother-in-law now becoming your stepfather.
And he appropriately came to me to ask my mother's hand in marriage. And I told him, yes, he did. And I told him that I would approve the marriage as long as he moved here to Maryland, and he did not take my mother to Arizona.
Oh, boy.
He said, okay. And so he came to Maryland. And
yeah, you can't take my mom away from me.
That's right. But there just wasn't anything that he did that I didn't approve of. He just very special, very warm-hearted, very appreciative of things. You know, she'd make him something special, and he just was, oh, I can't believe you made this for me. And he's a very special person. I didn't know how I was going to like a father, a stepdad, but when Debbie died, he cried and he cried and he cried, and he said, I don't have a daughter anymore. And he looked up at me and he said, would you be my daughter?
Oh.
So he was my dad, and I was his daughter. You know, for what time he had after that. And he loved the grandchildren. We got him a power riding mower.
Mm-hmm.
And he had never cut grass before, so he was doing circle 8s out in the yard and just having a good time. And the grandchildren were small, little, so he we got him a wagon put on the back of it. And when the grandchildren would come down she always had Easter and Thanksgiving dinner, and I had Christmas. And he took the children, all that they could get in that little wagon, and rode them all around the farm. He was gone to heaven. He was enjoying himself.
Now, is it true that both of your dads are Bud and Buddy?
My dad was John Ernest Jr., and they called him Buddy. Never Bud, always Buddy.
Okay.
Warren Leonard was called Bud.
What are the chances?
And never Buddy, that I know of.
Yeah, this is something out of a movie script.
Just like,
and you also didn't write about Debbie, so I want to hear you talk about her for a little bit, because I only remember I met her, meaning saw her face, and I was just a bratty little turd, but I met her one time. She lived on a trailer with horses or something, and that's it. It's just a brief memory that slips away into the fog. But how was that, getting a stepsister in your 40s?
I didn't know her, and I only saw her when she was like 8 or 9, I think, or maybe she was a teenager, and didn't pay any attention to her then, you know. But she took her job very seriously. She was a part of a rescue unit, a horseback rescue unit for people who were lost.
Oh, wow. I did not know any of this.
Oh, yeah. So that when they got a call, she actually belonged to this group. Now, I don't know whether there was another, I think there was someone that had lived with her for a time. I think she got into was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think some people took advantage of her. She did not have many things left when she passed. Debbie was cremated and wanted to be spread, her ashes spread in the rain. You know, it's not woods. It's the terrain where she traveled, and a little bit of it in this wonderful little spring that was near where her trailer was.
Okay.
One of the family took her horse. I believe it was Pam or Cindy.
Sounds about right.
That's what my memory's telling me.
I ended up with one of her parrots.
Okay. Well, yeah. Kurt negotiated the whole thing. And then we asked our pastor to have a memorial service for her here. And, you know, all our friends and all, I guess we had 50 people that came out to support Bud and Mom. I went to where they pointed one time by train. I don't know where where we got on the train, but we were almost to the end, and they pointed over that way and said that's where Debbie's trailer was, and the stream that she was by.
So did Phyllis take her in as a daughter, or by that time it's kind of like, well, she's all grown up doing her own thing?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. She supported everything that he did.
Uh-huh.
And he was so funny. Everything that he had, paper-wise, he went down and one of the freezers downstairs had stopped working. An upright stand-up freezer.
Uh-huh.
You have it. But what do you want a freezer for? Well, I just have something I want to do. And he put all of his personal belongings in that freezer.
What? Why?
Because it was a storage area in his eyes. And
it wasn't plugged in.
Right. And he locked it. And I was never allowed in it. I think one time Mama might have, Bud might have shown her something, but that was his place. And when he was gone, boy, there were lots of things in there I sure would like to have asked him about.
Well, we've been on the phone now for almost an hour and a half, and I have collected such wonderful stories. And I wanted to know if there was something you would want to share with the next generation. Let's say this recording, or if I type this all up and such, it's being read by a child you haven't even met yet. What do you hope to advise them on, or what do you hope that they grab onto in this life?
I would hope that throughout all of the journey and all of the things that we might have happened, that we might have new to us, that we might have in whatever it might be, whatever it's an activity or whether it's a purchase of a new property or whatever, that we all keep in mind that we all are Christians and we all are here by the grace of God. And the grace of God is the way we should pattern our lives so that theme can be passed down from person to person, from mother to child, to father to children, It's just so important. I don't know how we would have gotten through our generation, David's and mine, without the Lord. And I just pray that children to come can be raised that same way, that my children will instill in their children and in their children the beliefs that we've had through all these generations. I mean, when we go through the history of the churches around here, and I find our family name, the family names as being leaders, you know that those are Christian families. You know that they're praying when it's time to have a meal, and when it's bedtime, and waking up in the morning and thanking the Lord for another day, another time to see the beauty of the world. It's so important. And I just pray that the way the world is going doesn't hamper that it gets hidden and is not a reality, because it's my day and night. I just pray and pray that I can be what it takes to be the Christian that my foreparents have been, and before them.
Quite a legacy in Maryland with the Cross family, all the way back to, as you've told me, the 1600s. And I've gone and done just a surface look at that, and just going back and back and back and back. And on my other side of the family, I can get to the 1880s, and then people are in Europe. But this family just goes on and on and on.
Well,
we've been here a long time.
That's the Lusby family. That's grandmother. That's Alberta's.
That's yours too. John Cooke, your grandpa, he's
right.
seventh generation.
I'm like you. We hit John Cross, who was born in 1814 and died in 1896, and is buried at Emmanuel Church, and is the forefather of George and Russell and David, and I think he was hatched. And it bothers me terribly to see people guess. Oh, wow, he's John Alderson Cross. Well, how do you know that? Well, because it fits. Well, it doesn't fit. The dates aren't right. And that's one of my projects. But just think, how long they were here. The Crosses, they were all, their jobs were overseers. So they had enough knowledge to make the farms run enough to make money, or they wouldn't be classified as overseers.
Sure.
But I have an ancestor that I'm in the ladies' national chapter of the Daughters of American Revolution, and that's where I wanted to. I asked my Susan, no.
Yeah.
They don't have an idea of what's there. I did
one person per generation. So we've got you and me.
Are you in the AR?
Yeah, no, I looked into it and I said I'd be paying dues and have to volunteer and do all these things, and I said no, I wouldn't mind being listed, but I don't want to go to meetings or pay dues.
No, you don't have to belong to an to one of the societies. Did I tell you that I worked after Dave joined the business?
Well, I saw that you were teaching piano lessons, and I wondered if that was like you being able to put money in your own pocket.
Absolutely. Or the pocket of the the family. But once he came in the business from 1987 to 1999, I was historic preservation administrative aide for park and planning. It was so fun. But I decided to quit when Dave had his brain hemorrhage. And I said, this is too much. I was away from home more than I was at home. So, well, it was funny because my husband did not, while he was supportive and he said I could do it, he didn't fix lunch for 2 weeks. And I said, well, he told his mother. And I said, David, are you kidding me? I have got to get up and fix you lunch? And his mother got after me. She said, I cannot believe you're not feeding my son.
Oh, my goodness. Come on.
He said, do I need to have him come over here for lunch?
Oh.
Just silly little things like that.
Sure.